Be confident, be bold, be authentic, but don't forget to take action. This is Ordinary to Badass, where our stories empower women to step into the spotlight of their own lives and pursue what they're truly passionate about. It's time to step into the arena and become more than just extraordinary. It's time to become a badass with your host, Marie Sonneman.
Welcome to Ordinary to Badass, episode number 108. In this episode, you're going to hear from my friend, Andy Vargo, and I know that you're really going to love this episode. Andy is so brave and so badass. He talks about how he completely uprooted his life at 40 years old. He got a divorce, came out, and just changed a lot of the way he was doing his life and really got aligned with his goals and what he wanted. So we talk about his journey as well as how to make changes in your life. If you need to make a change, this episode is definitely for you. And then Andy also shares how to budget with your money and also a time budget. So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss Andy talk because it's so good. And before we get there, are you joining us on Wednesday nights for our chats in the Ordinary to Badass Facebook group? Every Wednesday night, we do a debrief of the episode and just talk about what our takeaways were and how we can implement these things in our lives. Here's the thing. Life is hard. And if you don't have a group of badass women or men who support badass women, if you don't have a group of those people around you, then it can be hard. Why go it alone, right? And then it's like we don't have to go through all of these hardships on our own. We can take what people say and apply it to our life so we don't have to go through it too. So like Andy talked about how he had to make all these changes and he didn't know how. Now he knows how to make these changes. So instead of you going through it and struggling trying to figure out how to make changes, you can take advice from Andy and then implement that into your own life. So I'd love to see you Wednesday nights, 6:30 Pacific time in the Ordinary to Badass Facebook group. Definitely join us. It's so much fun and I would love to see you there. All right, now let's get to the episode. Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I'm glad you're here. Today's guest is Andy Vargo. Andy, thank you so much for being here. Excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Marie. I am excited to be here as well.
So before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I thought, I kind of consider myself an ordinary badass.
Explain.
I'm on my way to badass, but I'm just an ordinary guy who's making my way in the world.
Okay, well, Andy is a friend of mine, and I will say he's a badass, and he's just being very humble. but everybody has their own opinion. So, Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that most people know about me right now is that I'm the Own Your Awkward guy, and that's the tagline I've come up with and my platform after flipping my whole life upside down when I turned 40 and starting over. And by doing that, I mean, I got divorced, came out of the closet, got fired from my job, started over in my career in a whole different path. And through that, I learned a lot about change and adversity and reframing how you view life. And so that's what I'm on a mission right now to help people do, just to own their awkward, in order to live their best lives, just by being okay with themselves.
Yeah. So can you dive into it a little bit more about flipping your life at 40 and what that was like and how you did that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I had been in a marriage that wasn't the best relationship for a long time. And, one of the things for myself was that I didn't demand respect from my partner because I wasn't secure in myself. So I didn't make them treat me the way that I deserved. And, they also didn't get the best of me because I was always undermining myself. So, it was just a bad mix of things not working out. But, a week before I turned 40, I was in the dining room and my wife at the time basically said, she didn't know what to do for my birthday, for my 40th. And so she was just going to have a nice dinner at home. And I remember in that moment thinking, my whole life is going to change in the next year because I want to be with someone that I've been with for 20 years that knows what I would want. And that's not even a question. And that was just a symbol of being unhappy. But I knew I wasn't happy at work. I knew I wasn't happy at home. And I knew that all that stuff just needed to change. And so, a few months later, we were trying to work things out and it turned into this, well, it's time to move on. And we've been talking about that for a while. But what I realized is that when you start to pursue what you think you want to do in life and you try to make your life happy, there's a lot of second guessing. And so that next year was just a lot of, why did I really do this? Maybe I just didn't appreciate what I had. And maybe I should have, maybe I should have stayed where I was and learned how to accept it. And so there was so much second guessing. But what I found that for myself, the big problem was that I hadn't accepted myself and I wasn't pursuing my dreams. And so I wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing, for a vocation or for life. And so as I started to open up and share that journey with people, that's where I really got that true reward. And I found that I needed to not be in a sales career anymore where I'm selling something for a corporation, and I needed to really be helping people with their lives. And as I started to get that fulfillment, then, the bigger struggles that I don't know if I would have made it through if I didn't have that outlet started to become smaller. Like, even though I was making less money than I was making in middle school when I was mowing lawns with no bills and, had just a lot of debt to overcome from divorce and still paying for, raising 3 kids, that became less stressful because I was actually fulfilled in what I was doing to help people.
So how did the bigger, and maybe you actually just answered it. You said like the bigger struggle started to become smaller. Can you like give us an example of that?
Yeah, well, I know for myself, I got to a place where I see as my rock bottom, and and I know where rock bottom was because it was the same day over and over and over again for probably months, where I would wake up every morning and it's wintertime and the sun is higher than it should be in the sky for the time that I'm waking up. In the winter, you should be waking up in the dark when you have a job to go to. That's just right. When you wake up and the sun is partway through the sky, you're like, oh crap, I slept in again. And just, you're in that depressed space.
Right.
But I woke up and I kept asking myself the same thing. When's it going to change? When's it going to get better? And this one day I finally had the realization that I didn't do anything yesterday to make today better. So if I didn't do anything yesterday, how did I expect today to be any better? And so in that moment, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do a couple simple things. I'm going to get out of bed on time. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to go for a walk outside, just anything to make my life better. And even though I've had bigger struggles since then, my mindset was better because I decided in that moment that I wasn't going to fall any further. And even though I ran into bigger issues with debt, I still had things to deal with in court with divorce. I still had relationships to repair with my kids and to be okay with myself. But once I decided that I could choose how far I was going to fall, those other things that were bigger didn't seem as daunting. And so that was kind of my moment where pretty soon, at first I did very simple things. I actually went to the store and bought a journal to write down, today I'm going to do these 3 things. And at the end of the day, I would write down what 3 things I actually did. Because if sometimes you have a plan and you beat yourself up because you didn't do those 3 things that you planned on doing, but you don't give yourself credit for the 14 other things that you did that came up that might have been even better than what you had planned.
Right.
So, eventually, at first it was little things like go for a walk outside, put in a good day's work, but very quickly it became, call a friend, meet up with somebody for lunch, go for a hike. And life just got better and better as I was filling my life with things that I knew I wanted to do to make myself better. And that's what made the bigger struggles kind of diminish because I wasn't focusing on them as much as building the life I wanted to build.
Yeah, there's so many good takeaways and so many actionable steps there that I love. But something that came to mind when you're talking too is, they say we have 90% of the same thoughts today that we had yesterday.
Mhm.
And so, like, it's so easy when we're depressed or down or feeling crappy to just do the same exact thing we did yesterday. But then it makes it hard to change our reality.
Right.
Um, and also, OTBers, a big takeaway there is, list 3 things in the morning that you can do, and then 3 things again at night, or check that you did those 3 things, as well as just small things, like Andy said, whether it's brushing your teeth, taking a shower, go out for a walk. Sometimes it's just the small things that make a big difference in your day. Um, so, Andy, earlier you talked a little bit about you didn't demand respect from your partner, and maybe you didn't respect yourself at the time. How did you go about changing that?
Well, I definitely spent a good amount of time in therapy, which, I think that we can't underestimate the help of having those professional conversations. Um, but, a lot of it was kind of just understanding that I had value. And that's really what it came down to, was that someone else's perception of whether or not you are right or wrong, that undermines our value when we believe their perception. And when you can then start to say, you know what, this is who I am, this is the value that I bring, you can choose to accept that or not, but that doesn't mean that there's any less value. It's like, it's just like when you look at money, if you take $1 to a store and you want to buy something and they say, well, this item costs $2, you can go to another store and they might sell that same item to you for $1. It's all subjective on what somebody thinks that thing is worth. And when we let someone else determine our value, then we're not taking control of the respect that we deserve. I will tell you, for myself, that was a big kind of eye-opening thing, was that, when you go through a breakup, you always want to, look at the situation and find the ways that you're justified in being right in moving on. And it's not to say that you aren't right in some pieces of it, but no matter what, you also have to look at, well, how did I set myself up for that? Now, if I was demanding respect, at the beginning of the relationship, it might have been a perfectly healthy relationship the whole way, because I wouldn't have taught someone to treat me that way.
Right.
And I also would have been bringing my better self to the table. So, I look at that and I go, I don't know how that relationship would have developed had I been more comfortable in my skin from the beginning. However, it didn't end up in a healthy space by the end. So it was a good thing to move apart.
Right. So when it comes to like demanding respect, or you talked about even just like during that time frame, second guessing yourself,
Mhm.
when you talk to your clients, like your coaching clients, what do you tell them that they can do to get out of that space?
Well, one of the things, yeah, I'm a big fan of making lists. And so I like to make a list of, just like I make a list of what I can do, what those 3 things could be today. I also like to make a list of everything that's good about yourself. Everything that is, I'm a big fan of focusing on the positive. So, one of the things that I do is I will make a list of all the good choices I make during the week, for example. And if, like, right now I'm trying to eat better and get a little healthier, so I have a 3x5 card I keep in my pocket, and I just tally. Sunday I made 10 healthy choices. Each one was a glass of water, a walk around the park, the choice to not stop walking after going halfway, little things like that. But I don't put on there all the negative choices, because then I'm focusing on that negative. And
Right.
so I think when we're looking at ourselves and commanding that respect, we need to make a list of every single thing that is the good aspects that we do for other people, the things that we are talented at. All, if you make that list and you look at that list and come back to it, even every day of the week, if you need to read that list and be like, you know what, I am a badass person. Look at all this stuff that I rock at, because you need that affirmation. If someone else isn't giving it to you, you need to give it to yourself. And then what that allows you to do is, when someone says, well, you're not X, Y, and Z, you have that confidence to say, you know what? It doesn't matter that I'm not X, Y, and Z, because I'm A, B, and C. And that's what I'm programmed to be. And that's fine. If you're looking for X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm.
then go find it somewhere else. It doesn't have to be an emotional, thing where it's just, I can't believe you're not that for me. But it's like a puzzle piece. You either fit together or you don't. And unfortunately, we idealize that other person being the other part of our puzzle. And then when we don't fit together, we're mad at them for not being the right piece. And yet
Right.
it really, you're putting a jigsaw together. You just move on to the next piece till you find the one that fits.
Right, right. And a lot of times, like in the beginning of a relationship, people try to be like if they're X, Y, and Z, they'll try to be A, B, and C just to fit in with the other person.
Right.
But it's like, and you can't be mad at them when they find out who you really are and don't like it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so much better just to be who you are and be okay with it. Because, I used to, I get on these dating sites sometimes because I'm still a single guy. And sometimes I would get on there and I would see the guy who's like, the picturesque, skiing down a mountain, snowboarding, doing all this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And he's running marathons. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to, swipe right on that guy. And then later I realized I'm not a skier. I'm not snowboarding down a mountain. I'm not running marathons. Our lives are not going to be in sync. So even though this is what is, from a societal standpoint, maybe the ideal guy with the activities and stuff, that doesn't fit into my life. And I learned that even if something looks good on paper, if it's not right for me, I need to be okay with saying, hey, that's not, I'd rather sit in a coffee shop with a guy and have a coffee and a conversation and go for a gentle hike, but you're right. Cause at the beginning of the beginning of that process, you start, you check all the boxes and you're like, okay, well, so-and-so likes hiking and they like movies. And I'm like, I like hiking and I like movies. And all of a sudden you find out that they like watching movies like at 2:00 on a Tuesday or waking up at 10:00 on a Sunday and watching movies. And you're like, oh, I was thinking like a movie a month,
Right, right.
But
That's funny but too, it's like maybe they would have fit with the old you, like if you were
right,
sleeping and stuff, but not who you are today.
exactly. And that's hard too, because we get into relationships and even relationships we've been into for a while, and we all go on our personal journeys, even separate from that relationship. And at some point, you may grow out of that relationship and then have to have that awkward conversation of we're not growing together, we're growing apart. And how do we respectfully make that decision too?
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about a little bit Own Your Awkward? I want to talk about Own Your Awkward and kind of where it came from. Why did you start Own Your Awkward?
Yeah. So, ironically, when I first came out, I came out to family and close friends, but I hadn't come out at work. And I was working on a book that I was writing about awkward interview moments. And so I had decided I'm going to capitalize on the awkward brand. I'm going to grab the website Awkward Career. And I was still just, publicly, I was talking about things that were not really personal to me. And, by a year later, I had kind of finished, being like, I can't do this halfway into the closet, halfway out of the closet. It's almost worse because I got to know like, okay, who knows what, right? And that
Right.
wasn't, and I wanted to be authentic. But when I started doing a podcast myself and I started kind of stepping into that awkward, I was doing these little videos that were awkward moments. And I actually had a friend of mine say to me, I'm watching your videos and I can't tell if you're trying to be serious or you're trying to be awkward. I think you need to kind of step into that awkwardness. And that's kind of how the actual line Own Your Awkward came together. And it's just kind of run from there, because on my podcast, I ask everyone to share what their awkward is that they've had to get over to live their best life. And it's really from the standpoint of, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin until I was 40. And as soon as I made that decision to be okay with myself and did the work to get there, I realized, even though that was my biggest fear, my biggest fear, I went to bed every night hoping I didn't talk in my sleep and say something that would make my ex-wife know I was gay.
Right.
I woke up in the morning, hoping I didn't say anything the night before. And then, thinking, okay, well, how am I going to dress so that I don't look gay? What am I going to order for lunch? If I go out to eat with coworkers, I don't want to order a salad because that'll make me look gay. And if we go out afterwards, it's like this little tiny stress that's in your day all day long. And that was my biggest fear, was having that exposed, because I didn't want to be that person. And so once I actually embraced that, I realized how much stress was gone from my day, how much more attention I had to actually live my best life. Because if you're spending 30% of your attention faking it, that's 30% of your attention that could be going towards your goals or your dreams. And so, I was getting, 60, 70% effort into living the life I wanted to live. So no wonder why it wasn't that positive. So once I started doing that, it's just, I kind of got religious about it. It's like, people need to know this. Like, you need to know that there's a better life and for you. And it doesn't matter, if you're gay or if you have body image issues or if you're shy or, it doesn't matter what your awkward is. Everybody's dealing with the same thing. Like we all have that same insecurity inside of us. We just tie it to a different character trait.
Yeah.
And usually that's what people love about you. People, I have people constantly who are either self-conscious of their image or they're self-conscious of maybe an accent because it makes them feel a different way when they're in a group who has a different accent. And every single time, everyone around them is like, wait, that's what I love about you. I love the way you talk. It's different and it's not, stale like everybody else. And yet that person is sitting there, not comfortable about opening up their own mouth to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard somewhere like the very thing that you were made fun of for as a kid is the thing that makes you cool as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's true. It's like we hold those things so tightly that we might have been insecure about as a kid, or somebody might have said something just joking around or whatever the case, even if it was a bully, but then we hold on to it as if it's absolutely true, even as an adult.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, is I'm a firm believer that the first time we hear something, we decide that's the absolute truth. And that's our baseline for what's real and factual. And so when you hear these things as a kid, you grow up and you don't question it because that's just something that's cemented in your value system.
Yeah.
And then as you grow older, sometimes you learn things as an adult that if you ever were presented the idea as an adult that for example, there's a guy that can make it around the entire world and deliver toys to all these kids on the stroke of midnight on Christmas Eve. As a kid, you hear that and you believe it until your hopes and dreams are crushed and you find out that might not be real. I'm sorry if there's still some believers out there. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but if you heard something like that as an adult, you'd be like, that's a kid's tale. But there are things that are way less obvious that we still continue to believe.
Right. It's like we're not taught as kids, or we're not taught at any point really to question what we believe or question what we were raised to believe, and just see if it's actually true or not.
Yeah. I heard a fact the other day that by the time you're 18, you've heard at least 150,000 times, I think was the number, that you can't do it. And you might have heard that you can do it 5,000 or 8,000 times. Like the range in what you've been told and what you hear is so ridiculous. And we don't realize as parents sometimes the damage we're doing to our kids by those kind of things.
Right.
With my mom, she would always say we can't afford something. Like whenever we'd go to the grocery store, I want a candy bar, she'd say, oh, we can't afford that. And until I was older, I always related that the only reason we wouldn't do something then was because we couldn't afford to do it, rather than saying it's not a healthy choice or I'm not choosing to spend money on that. And so I had a lot of work to do on budgeting to understand that you don't have to spend money just because you can't afford it, but also that there are other reasons to make choices that aren't tied to money. But that was one of those things that was just ingrained in my head that I then had to undo those practices around money as an adult.
So what do you say to yourself now about money?
Now I say I'm not choosing to spend my money there because I have a very thorough budget now. That was one of the positive outcomes of my divorce, was that I had zero money to spend, which meant I had to look at my budget daily to make sure that, okay, how much money do I need to make before the next bill is due? And having not been very good at budgeting practices, that has made me very good at budgeting. So right now I could tell you, based on the income I have right now, I have an Excel spreadsheet I do every year that goes through the year. So based on my current income, I can say, okay, if I spend this now, then I'm going to need to make up that money by August 4th. I was going to say 43rd, but that's not a day. August 4th, because I'll know that I have, based on my current bill structure, that's where I need to get. But it makes it more empowering to know what you're spending your money on, rather than to be a victim of, oh, if I just could make more money. Now it doesn't matter if I make $50 or $5,000, I'm in control of where that money goes.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes that we forget, like, some of the things that we struggle through are the very things that, like, make us strong, or like you can kick butt at doing something that you sucked at, a couple years ago. It might
Right.
take some work, but I'm with you. I hated doing a budget, and like I just wasn't in control of my finances, and until I actually figured out how to do it, and then it was like, oh, okay, like it gave me a little bit of power.
Yeah. I used to be afraid to look at it, and I would be that guy who would not open the bank account because it's bad. And that just made it worse.
Right.
And I actually saw that when they look at stock funds and IRA accounts and people's savings, people actually will, when times are going really well, they will look at their balances more. And when times are going really bad, they will look at their balances more, but they kind of ignore the middle. And so they wait for it to be a problem. And that's kind of where I used to be. And, for me to be able to say, you know what, I'm choosing to spend my money here. The nice thing with that too is that if my friends are going out for a weekend on the town and I don't want to spend that $100, I can make that choice and say, that's great. Maybe I'll catch you for part of that weekend and have a drink with you, but I'm not going to make it an all-nighter, or I'm not going to go 4 nights in a row because I'm actually working on this goal over here and this stays in line with that. And when it becomes a choice, then I can let go of that, fear of missing out and victimhood mentality too.
Right. So you kind of talked about, I'm working on this goal over here. How do you set goals for yourself, or do you set goals for yourself? Some people don't.
Well, I do, but in the past, I have found that my goals have been too vague and broad. It's like, I want my brand to grow. I want things to get to a certain point, but I didn't have tangible, measurable ways to mark my success. And as I started my business, that was tough because the only goal that I set was to make money. And it was really hard to set aside the growth that I was seeing that wasn't financial. So, I could be increasing a following. I could have some things that were really good, kind of feathers in my cap as far as growing my business. But if they weren't getting clients or selling books, then I would kind of be in that space of, well, is it really growing? And so I had to learn to shift from, maybe I don't measure things monetarily at the beginning, and I measure them by follower growth or by engagement. But so right now, one thing that I have done is I actually, on that 3x5 card that I mentioned, I realized that there's only two things that you need in order to get to your goals. It's opportunities and resources. And when I look at the goals that I'm pursuing, and my biggest goal right now is growing my business, I realized that I was missing out on a lot of opportunities that I would be frustrated by. Like, I didn't get on so-and-so didn't invite me on their podcast, or, I see someone else gets an opportunity to speak at an event. And why wasn't I invited? I know those same people. And so what I started doing is, on the back of this 3x5 card, I started listing all of my opportunities that were in front of me, because most of the time, the reason why I wasn't getting those opportunities is because I either didn't ask or I didn't follow up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of puts that ownership back on me of, okay, if I have a downtime and I don't quite know what to do with myself, I can just pull that card out and say, hey, do I need to follow up on any of these opportunities? Or as I start my day, I can look at it and say, is there an action I need to take in order to move one of these forward? And as soon as I started doing that, that made a big difference. I do still struggle with setting good goals,
Mm-hmm.
but what I've tried to do is to pick one area where my goal is to grow my business. I'll pick one area and say, well, I'm going to focus on getting 2 more coaching clients, or I'm going to focus on placing my book in 3 more locations in the next couple weeks, so that I have something tangible that grows my business, but that might be a smaller goal. And I try to keep my measurement of how I'm doing it progressing towards my goal focused on if I'm taking the action step and not as much on the result.
Yeah.
If I go in and I call on 3 or 4 stores, I'm taking that action, and at some point I will get my book placed. But if I'm beating myself up on only measuring whether or not I actually got it placed, then I stop asking for it. So
Tell us about this book.
So, so my book, which I should have sitting next to me, and I don't, but so my latest book, it's Own Your Awkward Life Changes. It's all about managing the changes that are in our lives. Like I call it the handbook for mastering change. So, it's filled with worksheets that you fill out. It has a budgeting section. It's all about if I'm going to partake on a change, how do I remove the emotion from change so that I can work through it and make it happen in the way that I want it to. So, I look at change as entering our lives in 3 different ways, right? We have, if you picture yourself sitting on the beach, you can have change enter like a really slowly rising tide and you don't even notice it. And then pretty soon you're overwhelmed and you're getting drug out to the ocean. The second way is where you're sitting on the beach enjoying a day. And I don't know if you can hear the fire engine going by.
Yeah, that's fine. It's life.
I'm not on the beach, apparently. So you're sitting on the beach enjoying, your picnic lunch, and all of a sudden a tsunami comes in and you're overwhelmed and you're out to ocean. But the best way that change can enter is where you're sitting on that shore again and you're packing your boat because you're going to go on a trip and you know where you want to go and you have time to put all the supplies in there. So the idea of this book is that no matter which way change enters your life, we get you back to that optimal place where you're packing the boat. So it might have been a surprise, but then we kind of say, okay, this is where we're at, but how do we step over here? And a good example, I mean, the budgeting chapter is one of my favorite chapters because that is something I was really bad at. And it basically breaks down, if I have $1,000 a month and I spend 500 on rent and whatever, at the end of that day, we know how much is left, and that's how much you have to focus on your change. And if you're planning to go to school and you have $20 a month left, well, then we have to look back at the rest and say, well, maybe I might need to cancel my gym membership if this change is important enough, or I might need to spend less on going out. And what that does is it's very empowering, because then you can say, well, if I only have $20 a month and I can't find another amount of income, then I need to say that's okay. I can just make this goal a 5-year goal instead of a 5-month goal. But it's very empowering because it makes you realize it's all within your choice. And then the other piece of that budget exercise is your time budget. So you have 168 hours per week, and it does that same exercise. How long do you sleep? How long do you have to already go to work? And how long does it take you to get ready for work? And okay, well, can I get away with just putting a baseball cap on or throwing my hair in a ponytail? Maybe I save a half an hour there. Where can I save time? Because at the end of the week, if I only have $20 a month and 2 hours a week, but I want to go to school in a program that takes 4 hours a week, then I have to find that time.
Yeah, and I really like the time budget that you're talking about, because we can waste time, like whether it's getting sucked into social media or watching TV, and if you don't take the time to write it out, or write it down, then you don't know how much time you really have to use or to budget for. So I like that.
Yeah, and the one that I found I always under budget is laundry, food prep, shopping, errands, all those things that have to be done, that all of a sudden I'm like, wait, how come I don't have that extra 8 hours this week? It's like, oh, because I want to wear clean clothes and eat. Like, apparently that's a thing.
So how often do you time budget?
I do it. I write my budget out. It's something that I need to do more, but I'll do it every couple months and then kind of try and stick with that budget for a bit and then come back to it. In the book, I encourage people to write out their ideal budget and then measure it for a couple weeks and then adjust it and then measure it again and see what's realistic. Because the first time we do it, we realize, oh, I'm gonna work out every day for an hour a day, and you put your 7 hours on there, and then you go through a couple of weeks and you realize that your workout actually takes you like an hour and a half by the time you come home and get showered and changed. And so the things that we think take a certain amount of time, we realize aren't quite as cut and dry as we thought. So one thing now is I kind of have a gauge of when I'm getting out of control or losing focus. And so each time I take on a new project, I try to also then relook at my time budget. So, if someone says, hey, can we do this new podcast show and have you co-host it with me? And then I say, oh, well, I gotta see what I'm committed to right now and see where I need to make some adjustments, because maybe I do want to do that, but I don't know if I can come up with another hour a week.
Right. Yeah, such a good exercise. Oat to beers, don't walk, run, go get Andy's book. I know it's going to be great. I can't wait to check it out. Andy, I know we're kind of winding down here. One question that I want to get in is, how do we own our awkward?
You own your awkward just by saying what it is and being okay with it. When you walk into a room full of people, try to think about what is that thing that you hope they don't notice about you. And then ask yourself, how would you treat someone else if that was their thing? If you look at someone else and they might not have the body that you want to have for yourself, but you see it on them, you probably are fine with them the way they are. If you see someone else being, having a different accent or something, think about how other people could perceive you and know that everybody else in that room is just as nervous for a different reason. So we're all having those same thoughts, and be okay with it and take small steps. You know what? Be okay with just stepping out a little bit to get a little bit out of your comfort zone, because you don't want to jump so far that you are, just that you crush yourself because you weren't ready for that. Take baby steps out of your comfort zone and, start with people that you trust. Start with, kind of safe spaces where you're like, okay, this is a group of friends that I feel like I can open up to a little bit. And then take that group of friends and add another person in, or then go out on the street or whatever it is. But
so good. I hope I didn't take your last piece of advice, because I wanted to end with a tip to encourage women who are in the arena fighting for the life that they want.
Yeah, I think that I think it's important to really define the life that you want and understand why you want it. And once you see that, it's kind of like, once something is important enough, then all that little stuff doesn't matter. So if you're out there, just know that anybody else, I saw this quote in a book by Brian Tracy called No Excuses. And he says, if you can look at anybody else who has the same issue that you see holding you back, but they got it done, then there's a way for it to happen. So if you think it's because you live in a certain area, or you have a certain income, or you have a certain disability, or whatever that is, if you think that's holding you back, but you see anybody else who was able to do it with that same thing, then there is a way. And we just have to keep fighting until we find that way.
So good. I love it. Andy, thank you so much for being on the show. And actually, I was going to wrap up, but how can we connect with you?
Oh, just, I'm all over. My handle on social media is Awkward Career, but you can Google Own Your Awkward or Andy Vargo, or check out my website, awkwardcareer.com. Happy to connect.
Awesome. I will throw that in the show notes. Andy, thank you so much. You've been a total badass, and I've enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And with that, we'll end our show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it. Okay, wasn't Andy amazing? I really loved how many actionable steps that he provided, and just things that you can implement today. Tactical advice. I'm always a fan of that. So if you like this episode as much as I did, I would be so grateful if you headed on over to iTunes and left a 5-star review. Every little review of the show helps, because it gets the show in the hands of people just like you. And of course, I love you and want more of you. Did that sound creepy? All right. Definitely, I would be so grateful if you leave a review, take a screenshot and throw it in your Instagram stories and tag me at Ordinary to Badass. I would be so grateful. And of course, I want to make sure to say thank you, because I know that you are busy and you have a lot going on. So if you don't have the time to leave a review, that's fine. I get it. I would love it if you just shared it with a friend who could find this episode useful. I can talk today. All right. I will leave you with that. Tune in on Thursday to hear why Andy Vargo is so badass.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast, and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass and get the chance to be on a future Spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.